Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I joined the Billericay branch of the Royal British Legion in 1975, which is going back a bit now. That wasn't my first involvement in the British Legion, as it then was, and I'll tell you about that later on. But this is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the British Legion. It's our 17th year, and although everyone's aware of the fact that we have an annual poppy appeal and remembrance parade, not so many people know that 2021 marks our 17th year. The Great War from 1914 to 18 was supposed to be the war to end all the wars. Such was the horror of it. It had a devastating effect on the lives of servicemen and their dependents. So many of our armed forces were killed or wounded, and so many families lost their breadwinner. It's not difficult to imagine the suffering the war caused and how much people hoped that there would not be another. During those 4 years, 4 organizations were created, and they represented the rights of soldiers, sailors, ex-servicemen, their widows and dependents. And those 4 organizations, I did make a note of the National Association of Discharged Soldiers and Sailors, founded in Blackburn, and that was affiliated to the trade union and also to the Labour Party. The National Federation of Discharged and Disabled Sailors and Soldiers, that was founded in London, and that was funded by the Liberal Party. Then we have the Comrades of the Great War, which was a non-political organisation, but with firm links to the establishment. And then we have the National Union of Ex-Servicemen, which was founded just after the end of the First World War, and that was a left-wing organisation. Now, the largest was the Comrades of the Great War, and that was formed in 1917. And it was non-political. The others hoped, nevertheless, to improve the lot of those they're represented by political means. Now, what brought them all together? I've discovered that there was a canteen fund of £7 million. And these 4 organisations were all very interested in getting their hands on the canteen fund. Right. Now, there was also another organisation called the Officers Association, and that was led by Earl Haig, who had been Field Marshal Haig, the Commander-in-Chief of the British Expeditionary Force in Europe on the Western Front. And he thought, well, I think it'd be a good idea if we could try and get these organisations together. Not split the money up, but get them all together. And thanks largely to his persuasive powers and the powers of Frederick Lister, a campaigner for amalgamation, 4 organisations were brought together in 1921 after a series of exploratory discussions and agreed to unite. In the aftermath of the war, it had become apparent that there was need for one composite organisation to support and represent all the members of the armed forces, to hold the government to account, and to ensure that all those who served and sacrificed were given the support they deserved and needed. And that one organisation was going to be called the British Legion. So it was an amalgamation of 4 organisations. And it was constituted on the 15th of May, 1921. Frederick Lister became its first chairman and was knighted in 1961 for his services to it. It adopted the motto, "Service not self." And that is the motto of the Royal British Legion to this day. Now, at the end of the Great War, given the immense loss of life, there was this great desire across the country to commemorate in a very public way those who'd given their lives in the service of their country. And this desire led to the erection of war memorials in every village, town and city throughout the United Kingdom. Plans were made for a war memorial alongside St Mary Magdalene Church in Billericay High Street. And on 16th October 1921, a stone cross on a face engraved with the names of the 62 local men who'd lost their lives, was unveiled and dedicated by Major General Sir William Thwaites. A guard of honour of 40 ex-servicemen was led by Regimental Sergeant Major John William Wheatley, born in 1877, who'd fought with the Coldstream Guards in the Second Boer War. And it was largely thanks to him and to Dr. formerly Major Wells, who lived and practiced in Billericay as a GP at 22 High Street, that the Comrades of the Great War had been able to set up a club in the town and that so many servicemen had joined it. So in other words, in Billericay, before the Royal British Legion or British Legion, we had the Comrades of the Great War. Between 1917 and 1921, the Comrades met in the Billericay reading rooms, and you all know where they are, opposite the church. But as the membership of the club grew, it became apparent that they needed premises of their own. They therefore acquired a plot of land in Western Road, Billericay, which at the time was largely undeveloped, and built a Comrades Hall on what is now 154 Western Road. They bought a plot, built a hall on it. John Wheatley, who'd become captain of the Great Bursted Parish Billericay Fire Brigade in 1908 after his discharge from the army, was deeply involved not only in the construction of the War Memorial, only a few yards from his fire station in Sun Street. Now, do you know where that was?
Yes.
If you look at Hunt's, the plumbing contractors, and you get to the end of those cottages in Chapel Street, look down the side, and there is the Billericay fire station, as was. Yeah. So he was involved not only in the construction of the War Memorial, but also in the recruitment of the Comrades and the construction of the Comrades Hall. He later went on to become Honorary Secretary of the representative committee responsible for the annual Remembrance Day service at the War Memorial. He died in 1957 after many years of service to the committee. Now, it just so happens that I know his granddaughter, and her name was Jill Ford. Her dad was Mr. Wheatley. Mr. Wheatley was the man who went around the Billericay schools, found out which children were not present. Go down to the farms where they were being employed, picking vegetables and etc. And wait for them back to school. That was Jill's father. Jill is now 88, lives in Dublin. But anyway, yeah, she briefed me on RSM Wheatley. He became, by the way, during the First World War, the Great War, he became an instructor, a firearms instructor, because he was a crack shot when he was in the Coldstream Guards. And when he came out of the Coldstream Guards in 1908 and became captain of the Billericay Fire Station, he was then seconded back into the army as a firearms instructor. Yeah. The construction of the hall was completed at almost exactly the same time as that of the War Memorial, and in late October 1921, less than a fortnight after its dedication, the hall was officially opened by Major Joyce, DSO, and Dr. Wells, who was a major in the Royal Army Medical Corps, had been awarded a military OBE for distinguished and gallant services and devotion to duty during the war, presided over the meeting, and he invited Major Joyce, who'd come down from Pall Mall in London, to perform the opening ceremony to address the meeting. Now, Major Joyce said it was his great pleasure and privilege on behalf of the National Executive of the British Legion to declare the club premises open and to convey the best wishes of the British Legion to the ex-servicemen present. He then explained the aims and objects of the Legion and urged everyone present to join it, since it was working for a common cause and for the nation's good. So the situation then in 1921 was that you had a very large contingent of the Comrades of Great War. You have this man coming down from London saying, want you all to join the British Legion. And it went from there. For the next 9 years, the Comrades Club continued to operate the hall. But over this period, most of the Comrades did indeed become members of the British Legion. When the British Legion's branch was formally established on the 23rd of August 1930, the Comrades Hall was renamed the British Legion Hall. Now, you may be wondering where this hall is.
Yeah.
I'll tell you in a moment. Now, the difference, by the way, between a branch and a club is the branch doesn't have a license, an alcohol license, and a club does. And therefore, there must have been a certain reluctance on the part of the people in Billericay to abandon the comrades of the Great War with their alcohol license and the Billericay branch of the British Legion, which didn't. So there we are. Yeah, but nevertheless, it was able to arrange many more social events for its members and associates than the alcohol-free branch. During the Depression of the 1930s, membership of the branch and of the club appears to have declined. That doesn't mean to say that the need for the British Legion didn't decline, because after the Great Depression after the Wall Street crash of 1929 and the Great Depression of 1930, immense numbers of people who'd been soldiers in the First World War found themselves unemployed. And in fact, in 1935, there were still 500,000 survivors of the Great War who'd lost their jobs. And the British Legion found jobs for 50,000 of them in 1935 alone. Yes, this is quite interesting. Now, there's one notable event, by the way, on 28th October 1936, and perhaps I will lead up to that by just mentioning this, which I've got. In 1935, the Prince of Wales, who was the president of the British Legion, urged people, the Legion, to try and reconcile ourselves to enemies, the Germans and the Austrians. And in fact, at a conference that was in 1935, it was agreed that a delegation go across to Germany. And in fact, Hitler, Ribbentrop, and Himmler were all very, very pleased to welcome this delegation. And things seemed to be getting quite friendly. And in 1936, a delegation of Germans came over to Billericay, and I don't know whether you've ever seen this rather grainy photograph, but and a couple of those out. You'll see that there's a swastika flying over Billericay. And the German salute. And that is because in 1916, on the 23rd of September, L-32, the German Zeppelin, was shot down over Billericay. The crew of 23 people were buried in Great Bursted Churchyard. And 20 years later, this delegation came from Germany and said, can we have the bodies back, please? We want to put them in a German war graves cemetery. And you'll see that the British Legion flags are flying alongside the Nazi flag. It's quite impressive, isn't it? Unusual. Well, things changed, of course, and by 1938, we were busily rearming, and any thoughts of friendship with the Germans had gone out the window. Yeah. Okay. The demise of the club, down in West Road, came in 1939, when, with the outbreak of the war, it suffered a final and dramatic decline in membership, possibly as a result of its younger members being conscripted into the armed forces. It consequently went into liquidation not long after war was declared on the 6th of September, leading to the disposal of whatever assets it possessed. The hall itself was immediately requisitioned by the local civil defence community for the duration of the war and converted into a retained fire station in 1948. Okay. It was used as such until it closed in 1973, sold off, and a house was built on the site. So that's what happened to the Comrades Hall. The closure of the hall left the remaining members of the branch without a meeting place. The branch had also suffered the loss earlier in the summer of its secretary, Charles Houghton, who'd been much involved in welfare work on behalf of the branch and the comrades. The members had no option but to return to the Billericay reading rooms, taking whatever they could retrieve from the hall with them until alternative premises could be located. I'm aware of the return of the branch to the reading rooms because, as a former chairman of the reading rooms, I decided to explore the dusty roof void of the building. No one had been up into it for ages, and among the broken chairs, tables, and other discarded items of furniture, I came across a framed roll of honour of servicemen from Billericay who died in the Great War. Yeah, it would have probably been displayed on the wall of the Comrades Hall, and I ensured that it was presented to the Cater Museum for safekeeping. So in the Cater Museum, there is this roll of honour. A solution to the accommodation problem was offered by Mrs. Alice Rose Taylor, the widow of Charles Taylor, a corn chandler, and their son, former leading aircraftsman, John Neville Taylor. The late Charles Taylor owned the Rose Hall in Chapel Street, originally built in 1850 as the British School, and had used it for many years as a grain store for his business. His executors no longer had a use for it. So you'll all be aware of the Rose Hall in Chapel Street, okay? Founded in 1850 as the British School, as opposed to the National School, which is in Langdon Road. Langdon Road is now the Scout Hut in Langdon Road. It was in 1875 that Parliament was saying that each local authority should found their own school. And that's why the Billericay School in the Langdon Road was built, which is now the Fold. Yeah. Okay. So she offered this solution to the Legion. And at this time, in 1947, of course, membership was very high indeed. Terrific number of people coming back from the services. The British Legion accepted the offer and purchased the hall on the 29th of May, 1947, for the then substantial sum of £900. Now, you could buy a house with £900. So I think the Taylors did rather well after this. They must have seen Legion coming. I've no idea how they managed to raise the funds, but I suspect that generous donations were made by local citizens, including Dr. Wells, who would have been in his 60s at the time and close to retirement. The purchase of the hall took place in the same year as the erection of the brick-built 1939-1945 War Memorial behind the pre-existing First World War Memorial. Okay, so that was in 1947. Although the club had ceased to function and the branch had no permanent place until the Rose Hall was purchased, members continued throughout the Second World War to attend the War Memorial on the 11th of November and to organise the Service of Remembrance Sunday, but thanks largely to Dr. Wells and John Wheatley. And can I say that during the war, donations to the British Legion were so great that they built up a very substantial fund, which was available at the end of the war and was used to provide housing, help with unemployment and welfare benefits of all sorts. And it's only later that the Legion had to dip into its capital and gradually deplete its capital. Okay. Now, my involvement with the Legion began in 1957 when I was poppy appeal organizer for my college at university. Yeah, and it was then still called the Earl Haig Fund in 1957, 58, when I was the organizer. And I must say that my college raised, in my first year as organizer, we raised £488. And when you look at it, that's 1/4 of the cost of a 3-bedroom semi-detached in 1957. It's amazing, you know, when you look back at it. Yeah. Okay, so as a former ex-serviceman, having served in the Royal Artillery Regiment stationed at Edinburgh, and subsequently on active service in Cyprus while I was seconded to military intelligence, I joined the branch of what was now the Royal British Legion in 1975. So I came in on the back of my national service. And I also came on the back of the fact that a pal of mine, Francis, Bombardier Francis, was killed in Cyprus, blown up when he was driving the CO's Land Rover. Yeah, and that did not really influence me to come back in. Yeah. Now, membership in 1975 was healthy at the time, comprising principally ex-servicemen from the Second World War and their wives. Most of the male members had seen active service in the Army or the Royal Air Force, and many had moved to Billericay during the explosion in the population of the town, when the railway line from Liverpool Street to Southend was electrified in the 1950s. Yeah. They had been supplemented by ex-national servicemen like myself, Fred Lloyd, for example, you'll remember, gentleman. He was in the same regiment as me, by the way, and in the same place. Yes, to remember, so we joined to support the objectives of the Legion, to remember our comrades, and to raise enough money through the annual poppy appeal to provide essential welfare for veterans and their families. Right, yes, and talking about the Old Hague Fund, it just reminds me, it just flashed through my mind, there was a student, rather stupid student, who was going around the town with a big placard saying, "It's all a hoax. Earl Hague died years ago." But nevertheless, my university, we raised an immense amount for the fund. In fact, talking about that, the fund was kicked off, by the way, the poppy appeal was kicked off in 1921. And Armistice Day was the 11th of November. And Remembrance Sunday was initiated in 1927, for the Festival of Remembrance the day before. So initially, it was the 11th of November that was going to be the day. But as it's a movable feast during the days of the week, they decided on Remembrance Sunday, the Sunday closest to the 11th. Yeah. Now, what happened thereafter was that I looked after the Rose Hall from 1997 until 2014. The Rotary Club of Billericay took over the Rose Hall in 1976 because we couldn't afford to maintain it. By the way, the branch in 1975, as it was then, we couldn't afford the maintenance costs. Rotary Club of Billericay took it over in 1976. They gave up in 1997, and then I ran it for 14 years to 2014, or more than that, 1997, 2014. And then I realized that we couldn't afford to keep it going. And I wrote to the head office of the Royal British Legion and said, sorry, it's going to cost 80 to 100,000 pounds to keep this place standing. You're going to have to sell it. And that's the reason why the Rose Hall was sold. And it was sold and converted because it had D-class planning use and could be used for community purposes. It was let out to an organisation called Synergy, which dealt with drug abuse. But I'm afraid to say that Synergy ran out of funds, and I'm not quite sure who's in the Rose Hall now. Yeah. Once we'd sold the hall, it didn't mean to say that we had no social activities. And from the time it was sold, and in fact well before, it had an annual dinner for its members, an old-time dance section, a whist club, and in the early 1980s, a Scrabble club. But while we were in there, it concentrated principally on fundraising and welfare matters, including making sure that elderly ex-servicemen and their dependents were given advice on the benefits available to them through the Legion itself and through governmental agencies and the local authority. And I have to emphasize that while we were in there from 75 right around 2014, our welfare activities were as important as anything else. Okay. Well, we're homeless now as an organisation, but with rooms available to us in the Chantry Centre, the work of the branch continues. And in fact, we are very grateful to the Scouts for tiding us over between 2014 and now. The pandemic has restricted the ability of the branch to raise funds, most of our activities have now been taken in-house by head office. But with the relaxation of the COVID regulations, the committee, which has been meeting on Zoom, has been able to resume its external activities, including to date its attendance at the Billericay Summerfest. We had a barbecue. We're assisting obviously in the centenary celebration, and we obviously are much involved in the Remembrance Day parade and Remembrance Day activities. So although over the years the largely inactive element of the membership of the branch has shrunk in size, as the number of Second World War veterans has gradually diminished, notwithstanding the reduction in numbers, the amount raised by the branch has increased every year until 2020. And it's important to note that membership is not restricted to service personnel if it ever was. And the branch is looking forward not only to an increase in active membership and the assistance of non-members, but to surpassing the amount raised in 2019. The need for funds still exists to provide financial, social, and emotional support to members and veterans of the armed forces and their dependents. In this respect, the bravery of ex-servicemen and women has been brought vividly to the attention of the public through events like the Invictus Games, where those who fought for their country display their determination to overcome what appear to be impossible physical odds. We owe a debt to those people and others like them, and it's that debt that we in the Legion and other like-minded citizens of Billericay try to repay. That's it.